Sheryl-Anne has been the engineer in SIL's genetic engine room for close to 2 decades, the skilled mechanic overseeing its operation, maintenance, and future development. But it doesn't stop there. This morning she'll talk to us about the next best thing, the New Zealand genetic evaluation. Sheryl-Anne.
Thanks, Matt. I feel a little bit of a fraud standing up here. A lot of the slides I actually managed to take from my talk last year. Last year we said we were going to combine and perform a national evaluation, and we have managed to do that successfully. So, just a quick overview of what I'd like to cover today is the implementation for the last 12 months, some of the common queries we've had, how standard indexes fit within the NZGE, and then reporting by connectedness, which is our current development. Since SIL began its genetic evaluation in 1999, there were initially only 6 gold trait groups, 5 production and 1 health gold trait group. So it was quite easy to understand the evaluation. It was fairly simple, but over time, we've been fortunate to have continued development and growth within the system. We've added gold trait groups. Until now, we've got 18 gold trait groups possible within the evaluation. And there's a lot of other options within the evaluation that have made things more complicated. Until recently, it was becoming very confusing between different evaluations. You got getting different results. So the vision from SIL was to provide breeders and farmers with the best genetic information possible to enable better breeding decisions by combining all flocks into one analysis, which would include all the information, which would give us the best estimates of genetic merit and allow us to benchmark flocks more accurately. So going from confusing numerous analyses into one national evaluation. That was the vision, that was what we promised to deliver when I stood up here last July, and that's what we've achieved. The current New Zealand National Genetic Evaluation, NGE, will be refer to it in brief. It runs weekly and has since July 2000, it should be 16. It started every week at 7 p.m, starts to write out the data from the database, and it's usually completed on Sunday by about 8 o'clock in the morning. Runs off reports that are awaiting or is ready for bureaus to run their analyses during the week. This was a change from an on-demand analysis system we'd had previously, but several breeding groups were already working within this system of running weekly evaluations. So it seems to have, breeders seem to have been comfortable with the change from on-demand to weekly, and that seems to meet their needs. Currently, there are 1,160 active and reference flocks in the evaluation and 8.7 million animals. Some of the common queries we've had over the last year since its introduction: the complexity of the evaluation, changes in values compared to the evaluations you may have been familiar with, re-ranking of animals between existing and the NZGE evaluations, within flock breeding values, and how the NZGE and national genomic evaluations related. Is the NZGE more complicated? Previous analyses varied from analysis to analysis depending on the flocks that were included, depending on the analysis year range that was used for the evaluation, depending on the gold trait groups that were included, and that could vary from 6 through to about 20. And there are other options within the analysis, such as the inclusion of hogget reproduction data. Was pregnancy scanning data included or not? And for the meat gold trait group, did CT and Viastan data get used? So these were all differences between the previous evaluations. So within the NZGE evaluation, all analysis options are the same every time. So I would actually say, although the NZGE evaluation has more gold trait groups and works over more flocks, it's actually a lot simpler. The evaluation options are always the same. That's not going to be a factor changing from week to week. And this is just some of the graphs that we produced in the implementation testing phase, and that have been, probably some of you would have seen if you've been to the road shows that Sheryl and the SIL team ran during the year. So this compares this is a maternal comparison, dual purpose gold trait groups. It was just comparing the breeding values that came from ACE along the bottom line here. Sorry, I've got a pointer. The bottom line is ACE, and the ones on the vertical axis are the NZGE analysis. So you can see the lines are pretty much straight. Some animals move around between the previous and the current analysis, but most of those changes were due where flocks had become connected. So that was for dual purpose, pretty good relationship between the previous and current analysis. In the terminal side, there was a little bit more movement, perhaps because terminal side flocks are smaller, and so combining into the national evaluation provided more connectedness that hadn't been there previously. There was also queries from some of the groups during the year about the effect of having crossbred progeny in the analysis. So some of the groups that had before run within breed analyses, and now they were into the NZGE, which combined all breeds. And so there was a lot of work went on by the SIL team to look at the effect of having crossbreds in the analysis. This is within the Texel crossflock analysis, and what was shown that some of the animal rankings did change, but partly that was because of changes in connectedness. But as many animals, as many sires go up as down when you introduce the crossbred progeny. So it wasn't a fact that the crossbred progeny were just purely pushing the sires that had crossbred progeny up. In actual fact, when you looked at the breeding values, just as many go down as up. And this effect was also looked at in the Romneys with a similar sort of result. So the impact overall, this is just an example of the number of evaluations that have been run since SIL started back in 1999. We were trending along about 2,000 evaluations a year with multiple differences. It was getting very confusing for breeders as to what analysis was being run and what their breeding values looked like from one analysis to the next. Over the last 12 months, we're down to less than 1,000 evaluations through SIL, and a lot of these were used for testing purposes. As we moved to the NZGE, a lot of the breeding groups ran off their own analyses to compare how the rankings between the NZGE and their current analyses ran, and so now we're running very few evaluations. How do standard indexes fit within the NZGE? Initially, SIL indexes were defined by the gold trait groups that were used in the analysis. So if you ran an analysis just for example, the Romneys, you might put in growth, meat, wool, reproduction, survival. But if you were a terminal sire group, you would include growth, not meat. You might include meat instead of wool, reproduction, survival. The analysis defined what went into the index. The index was called an overall index, and depending on what gold trait groups you put into the index, your index included those gold trait groups. As we added more health gold trait groups, we actually split it out to having production indexes, which was the production side of it, and then the overall index, which also included the health traits. However, when we go to the NZGE analysis with 20 gold trait groups, it's certainly not relevant to have an index which includes all the gold trait groups. So instead of having the same name for indexes that include different gold trait groups, too many gold trait groups, sorry, should have shown that before, we've now implemented standard indexes. And so what these enabled us to do is to take the gold trait groups that were most useful to each of the production systems and to base those as our standard index. So for maternal worth, reproduction, lamb survival, lamb growth, adult size and wool. And within the terminal sire breeds, reproduction, lamb survival, lamb growth and meat yield. So these give breeders and commercial buyers confidence that when they look at an index, it means the same thing. So if you look at any report and it has maternal worth or a terminal worth, that will always have the same breeding values included in it. So instead of being a dual purpose overall from one analysis that has a different number of gold trait groups to a dual purpose overall from another analysis, you can now look at a maternal worth and it will always be the same index. Bureaus and breeders are able to customise their indexes if they don't agree with the gold trait groups that are in those standard indexes. They're able to add whatever they want. If you're a maternal breeder and you do meat production, you can customise an index that has meat yield in as well as the maternal part. So it's still possible to customise your index, and still has some customised indexes already set up, those that are most commonly used and those that go onto the SIL ACE report website. So we have already set up maternal worth with meat, maternal worth with wormfec, and a couple of the other health trait groups.
Excuse me. Your terminal worth index has got reproduction in it.
Yep.
Is that true?
No, sorry. No, sorry. Obviously copied one line down. Well spotted. Definitely not. So the development we're currently working on, and it continues along from the reporting confusion, is reporting by connectedness. Now, the purpose of a cross-flock report to enable you to compare animals across flocks, so you can see how they rank. However, cross-flock evaluations generate breeding values for all animals for all gold trait groups, and so typically, 18 gold trait groups now available. A lot of breeders are certainly not recording the traits in all of those 18 gold trait groups. If a flock's not recording or has insufficient information to be able to benchmark between flocks, then those flocks are not connected. And it's not valid to compare breeding values across flocks that are not connected. If you can't benchmark it, you don't know where the actual relativity between the flocks exists, and you shouldn't be comparing the breeding values. But flocks can be connected for some gold trait groups and not others. You might be connected for growth, you might be connected for meat, you may not be connected for wool. Another flock may be connected for growth and meat, but not wool. So it becomes quite, and then if you go into indexes, you're connected for an index if you're connected for all component gold trait groups in that index. However, it can be quite complicated if you're trying to monitor in a cross-flock report with a number of flocks in it, what flocks are connected for what gold trait groups and indexes. So what we needed is a simple tool for cross-flock reports that identifies valid comparisons. And so in this tool, what we're about to release is unconnected breeding values and indexes are not reported. They'll be left blank on the report, or they can be left off the report. So a simple tool. So this is an example of a terminal worth report. The example IDs down the left-hand side, the terminal worth index, its rank, and the three the component sub-indexes, survival, growth, and meat. But you don't know, looking at that report, whether you can validly compare all those animals. Are the flocks those animals from, are they connected or not? So if we were to blank out the values that shouldn't be compared, you can immediately see what values can be compared or not. So the ones that are blank are where the flocks are not connected for those gold trait groups. These, the third column, which is rank, all the animals that are missing a value become ranked at the bottom and have an equal last place. But you can quite quickly see that it's quite a powerful tool for enabling you to see where comparisons are valid. And the bureaus are able to then use this to say, don't even put the animals on the report if it has a blank value. So I've left the animals on there, for example, for examples, but a bureau would probably say, don't report those animals. And similarly, this is a report for a maternal worth. You can see the flocks that are connected for wool, or some flocks are not connected for reproduction. Most flocks tend to be connected for growth. In this report, I've actually sorted the animals the flocks. I've used two levels of sorting. One is on the maternal worth index, so if you weren't connected, you're at the bottom of the report. But within that, I've used a second level of reporting on growth. So if I wanted to know, well, these animals aren't actually any good, I can't compare them for maternal worth, but where do they rank according to growth? So in the 5th or 6th column, they're actually also ranked by growth. So you can actually start using some flexibility to pay more information, even though they don't get the overall index. The impact of reporting by connectedness, this is what we've been looking at. I've used a few examples here. It will depend on what flocks you're actually reporting, but in general, what's the impact of reporting by connectedness? How does it affect the animals on the report? In the first report I looked at, 53 terminal sire flocks. This is the first 3 pages of that report, just for example, and the yellow ones are the ones that would be dropped off the report because they're not connected. So in the top three pages of the report, there's not very many affected there. If you take the bottom 3 pages, quite a lot, considerable more flocks, animals will be dropped out because the flocks are not connected. And this just demonstrates that when there's no connectedness between the flocks, the animals can be penalised. So you shouldn't be comparing their breeding values. So there was a 3-year sire summary. Out of the 515 sires on the report, 405 were connected, 110 were dropped, and only 23 of those animals that were dropped were from the top half of the report. I did another report with a smaller group of terminal sires, a different breed. 53 sires, 34 connected, 19 dropped, only 1 from the top half. And that's the entire report, the 2 pages of the report that shows the animals that would be blanked out. And an example for a dual-purpose flock with 38 flocks, 564 sires, 473 connected, 91 dropped, and only 38 from the top half of the report. So people that are concerned that the best animals will be dropped out because the flocks are not connected, that's not what we're seeing. So the current, in the final step, the current traffic light graphs show the connectedness within the NZGE analysis. So it reports on the main cluster within the NZGE analysis. It doesn't give you information on where other connectedness might exist, even if they're not connected to the main cluster. So if we go back to the horrendous dendrogram that's also produced, this is a dendrogram for the meat. It shows where all the flocks lie, who they're related to. The main cluster we use for reporting is the one with the blue highlight. So they would be on the NZGE traffic light, so that's the one this reflects, whether they're connected or not within that main cluster. But in actual fact, there's another cluster further down the graph there that would be valid to compare within those animals, even though they're not connected to the main one. Because they're connected to each other, we can do valid comparisons within that group. And so what we're actually working on is traffic light tables and reports for bureaus that will show the connectedness between selected flocks. So rather than just being the main traffic light from the NZGE, you'll be able to put in a group of flocks that a bureau or a group is interested in, and it'll show what connectedness is for those flocks. So reporting by connectedness is designed to highlight where flocks are not connected for a gold trait group, so that on their cross-flock reports, indexes and breeding values shouldn't be compared. So it's a simple tool, and it's due for release soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheryl-Anne. Is that going? Thanks, Sheryl-Anne. Oh, sorry. We've got time for one quick question, but aren't we lucky that there's actually a system in place to handle all this data and also someone that actually is in the background making sure it works properly?
On one of your slides, you said that most people were linked for growth. In the column next to it, they all had an adult weight. I'm guessing most of those were only derived from weighing lambs rather than from actually weighing adult ewes.
More than a third, I think it's getting close to half of flocks are recording adult size now, and the intention being discussed at the moment is within a couple of years, adult size will be used as a connectedness criteria for adult size.
Yeah, because if you blanked it out and people were upset, they would soon start weighing their adult ewes.
That's right. Yeah, which is why that's exactly it. And the intention is to signal now that in 2 years' time that would apply, so that people can start recording adult size. The best way to get accurate adult size breeding values is to weigh adult ewes.
So you say it's up to half the breeders now?
It's somewhat below that, but it is increasing.
And is that half the ewes or half the breeders?
I tend to look at it on a flock basis.
Yeah, and is it the bigger flocks that are weighing?
Yeah.
No.
But people who say I don't like adult breeding values and vote by not weighing their ewes.
Look, thanks very much, Sheryl-Anne. And again, there's a short question time at the end of this session.